Mario Kart Tour just dropped not too long ago, paving the way for the next installment in the Mario Kart series. And I gotta say, it's weird. Now, I've been playing Mario Kart for a while now, from the SNES days to the motion control generation to even Mario Kart VR not too long ago. A few of us from my world actually drove out to Washington, D.C. to give it a whirl last year, and it was an absolute blast. There's just something about taking aim with a green shell in hand and letting it fly into the competition. Although I have to say, given how complex the VR setup was, I did get a bit of height-triggered vertigo when I fly off the edges. But the entire journey takes us to where we are today, playing Mario Kart vertically on a mobile phone. Exciting. I kid, of course. It's actually a pretty neat concept. You know, the idea of Mario Kart being accessible to anyone with a phone for free is pretty cool. Of course, stuff like characters and tracks are locked behind paywalls, but it's still something that anyone can pick up and play. And while cycling through the different courses and potential characters, my mind started to think of the characters from the past that were missing, like the truly unique Pink Gold Peach. How could she not be available? But in all seriousness, there's one character that would absolutely love to see return, and there's a really neat story behind why this character should return in Mario Kart Tour. Because although this character was someone you face off against rarely in the entire Mario Kart timeline, their role is actually quite monumental. Because in reality, they hold the truth to what really happened in the past. The story of what took place after a certain Mario game came to a close, and how there was a bigger plot at play than we were led to believe. So sit back, buckle up, and get ready to do a deep dive into some Mario lore. Just a quick announcement before diving into all of this, I now have merch. I have some pretty comfy t-shirts. I have a nifty snapback hat. If you love my content and you want to support me further as a creator, you can find links to these in the description below, and there'll be more info at the end of the video. Oftentimes, the Mario Kart games in general don't really offer a whole lot in terms of defining key moments in Mario lore. Trying to piece together a Mario timeline out of Nintendo's disconnected entities is a laborious task alone. But that doesn't mean we can't utilize aspects of these games to help us understand a greater picture. As newer games are released, sometimes new characters and areas are reworked into the game as sort of a throwback to the previous adventure. And in 2005, we actually had something take place that immediately provided us with a resolution to a game that only came out a few years earlier: Super Mario Sunshine. Now, for those of you who have been here since the beginning, and I mean like way back when my channel first started beginning, you'll know I created essentially an entire set of documentaries around Luigis Mansion and EGAD. This ended up spanning the entire timeline all the way up until Odyssey. We talked about the portrait ghosts being real humans or actual ghosts. We talked about EGAD being a toss-up between being good and evil. We talked about the magic paint from Super Mario Sunshine and how it actually comes from an entirely different world. And last, we talked about the warp paintings in the world of Mario, and how it ties into the magic paint from Super Mario Sunshine. 4 videos spanning the entire range of EGAD's mischief essentially. But we're going to dial things back and take a trip to that second video for a moment. A video called Is EGAD Evil? From the summer of 2016. In this video, I talked about the morals of EGAD as a person and what his true intentions are overall. He's always painted as someone who is on our side, but in reality, he's not. To quickly recap, he straight up gave Bowser Jr. a super dangerous paintbrush that threw the entire island into chaos. Bowser Jr. tells us, quote, "A strange old man in a white coat gave it to me," end quote. In which Flood then responds, confirming it was EGAD, the same person who made Flood. So someone who provides our hero with the tools they need to save the day is also providing the opposite team with the tools they need to destroy. Luigi's Mansion already left a bad taste in my mouth with how EGAD basically hoards human spirits, and EGAD's carelessness certainly hasn't improved since then at all. Seeing how he sold the portrait ghost in Dark Moon is kinda grim too, and generally uncaring. All of this is why the events of Super Mario Sunshine were such a disaster. EGAD knew Mario would be stopping on the small landing strip out in the sea and had Flood waiting for him. It was planted there on purpose, as was the paintbrush in the hands of our foe. One might label EGAD as someone who only cares about his own experiments, or someone who deals products to both sides by creating problems and offering the solution. Now, before you say, but Swanky, game theory already covered that topic, that's completely true. Actually, we both have. My part 1 and part 2 videos are basically the same theory, reaching the same conclusions with most of the same data points. But when making my videos back in the day, and technically even after watching the game theorist's rendition of the same concept a year or so later, there was one detail that was left out. I touched on it briefly as a passing comment, but honestly I should have explored it a lot more, because it completely explains what Super Mario Sunshine was really about. Providing 2 tools to wage war against each other was really only the beginning. because there's something we weren't told about Flood. Something that in the modern age, we're a lot more aware of. And in order to understand what happened, we're heading back to the world of Mario Kart. In 2005, a few years after the release of Super Mario Sunshine, Mario Kart Arcade GP was released. This was a Mario Kart game largely produced by Namco that appeared in many arcades across the world. It was the first time crossover characters were introduced to the series as well, initially in the form of Pac-Man characters. The game had a multitude of tracks and characters, and also a neat series of challenges that the player could tackle. And those challenge races are important because the final challenge in the game was a bit different than the rest. If the player completed all the 5 previous cups in the game, the Rainbow Cup would become unlocked. Mind you, you had to pay to play each race. So it was definitely behind a hefty paywall, but the challenge for the Rainbow Cup was to race off against Mario. Except, not exactly the same Mario you know and love. It's a mechanized form of Mario. And of course, smack dab on this foe's head is the iconic EGAD logo. EGAD's latest invention happened to be a robotic clone of Mario who you would race one-on-one for ultimate glory. But this whole ordeal is strange, no? Robo Mario drives and behaves just like real Mario. Why would EGAD build him just to challenge our plumber? And that's where things get interesting. So let's head back to Super Mario Sunshine now. EGAD has produced all sorts of wacky inventions in the past, but a robotic clone of someone is a first. Building a robot that looks like someone is one thing, but building a robot that mimics the behavior of someone is an entirely different situation. No matter how good of a programmer EGAD is, there's no way to replicate Mario's infinitely complex mind from scratch. How Mario moves, jumps, reacts, etc. All of that would be extremely hard to mimic unless you could tap into Mario's mind, or in the very least, record everything about him. And that's exactly what happened. Super Mario Sunshine was never really about the surface level problem it appeared to have. Having Flood and the paintbrush wage war on an island was really only the catalyst for a deeper set of research. In order for Mario to clear his name and not go to prison, he had to use Flood. There was no other option for him. If he didn't have Flood, he wouldn't have been able to clean up the mess. But he's also basically opting in to wear an intelligent AI strapped to his body. Something that could constantly study his movement patterns, jumping height, positioning, how he responds in certain situations, etc. Every single moment during the game could have just been EGAD using Flood to basically data mine Mario as a whole, and use it to create an AI that was a complete copy of Mario. Not something created from scratch to be like Mario, but using Mario himself to build a complete intelligent copy. It's no different than modern smartphones collecting data about us, from what we say, to what we search for, and where we go. I'm surprised Mario wasn't hit with a privacy policy upon picking up Flood. Super Mario Sunshine was never about cleaning up an island. It was about cloning Mario's mind. But all of this gets even deeper, so stick around. Back in Mario Kart Arcade GP, we encounter this Robo Mario as a foe that we race against. This in itself is the ultimate test. If Robo Mario is capable of matching Mario's driving abilities and responding in real time, that would technically let EGAD know just how successful his experiment was. It's the ultimate test, really. Driving at insanely high speeds as Robo Mario wails on us with tons of projectiles and items is like the perfect test for putting Mario's reaction data to use. Nothing requires quicker reaction times than racing at insanely high speeds. And what were the results? EGAD's experiment was beaten. The mechanical body of Robo Mario couldn't beat the real deal. This experiment had reached its threshold in performance. But EGAD certainly wasn't done yet. Enter Luigi for the second time. Knowing that the Mario cloning process was a colossal failure, EGAD turned to a different approach. Utilizing a device attached to a character would only at best provide a limited data set. In order to create the ultimate clone, EGAD actually needed a mind. And that's where Luigis Mansion Dark Moon takes a corrupt turn. There is one invention that does exactly what EGAD needs, and that's the Pixelator. Normally, this device is utilized to convert Luigi into pixels and send him from one location to another through a screen. But that exact concept is terrifying. Luigi as a whole is converted into data, passes through EGAD's computer system, and then is expelled elsewhere in the world where he is reassembled. But who's to say he wasn't copied during that process? He's literally data within EGAD's computer. How hard would it be to save a copy at that point? Mind you, the size of someone's mind would be incredibly large storage-wise, but with this technology, it might not be that far off from what it's capable. And all of this leads to the next step in the cycle. A mechanical body didn't suffice as it could never match the subtleties of a living being. But if something was more organic and fluid, that would be a completely different story. Something like Gooigi. Surprisingly, everything I just said about Dark Moon was confirmed by Nintendo. It's funny because I wrote all that out without realizing that this very concept was explained within the Luigis Mansion 3DS promotional materials. This video was all linked together by individual occurrences without the knowledge that Nintendo threw their hat into the ring too. So for those who haven't read these archives, Nintendo basically put out a series of journal entries from EGAD leading up to the release of the game. There are 6 chapters in total covering the research and creation of Gooigi from ghostly goo. It all started out with EGAD spilling some Evershade coffee onto his vials of ghostly energy. And from that point forward, his research took off. Of course, what started off as basic experimentation then turned into the concept of utilizing this goo to mold into something more lifelike. But it turns out this goo wasn't able to hold onto a human-like shape without something else. And that's when EGAD turned to his pixelator data from before. He basically took Luigi's biological data and infused it into the goo, creating Gooigi. He then began showing Gooigi all the research tapes from Luigi capturing ghosts, further educating this slime-like copy of our favorite green plumber. And just like with Mario Kart Arcade GP, the best test environment for this copy to further develop its potential is to be thrown right alongside Luigi in his first ghostly adventure. EGAD sends Gooigi back in time to the first mansion on the 3DS version of the game, to learn and match Luigi's behavior in real time. During this process, Gooigi captured tons of ghosts that were then brought back to the future and used to enhance Gooigi's abilities. The results of this research is what granted Gooigi the ability to pass through objects and still retain his form. The neat thing about this is that back in 2005, we could have already pieced together this future timeline just based around the idea that EGAD was trying to clone one of the Mario brothers. The fact that history is repeating itself is no surprise. That was 14 years ago. Mario's mechanized clone wasn't capable of mimicking Mario's abilities due to being built around stats and figures instead of his actual mentality. Gooigi is the advanced form of Robo Mario. It's honestly just like the Terminator. The first threat was robotic and physical, while the second threat was technically the more advanced form, where it was malleable and fluid. But given that, it makes you wonder, will the goo turn on us at some point? In the final journal entry of EGAD, Gooigi's weaknesses are explained. At this stage in development, Gooigi is now a combination of the Evershade Valley ghost from Dark Moon and the ghost from the first mansion in Boo Woods. But during these events, EGAD accidentally gets goo all over his face, and it causes him to pass out as he can't breathe. He then blacks out and says he doesn't remember what happened. He awoke on the floor of the shower, so he assumed he made it there and washed off the goo. This is what they use to segue into talking about the goo's weaknesses. But hold on just a second. This part bothers me because at the end of the article, this close death encounter is brought up again in the final sentences. Obviously, it could simply be the writer's way of closing out the journal. But there's this strange feeling that I can't shake that whatever was on EGAD's face, the substance that vanished or washed away, isn't gone forever. Part of me wonders if this is truly how EGAD as a villain is born. It'd be really neat to see all his research blow up in his face as the goo becomes completely sentient and makes its own decisions. Or worse, EGAD's close encounter leads to a goo version of himself that must be dealt with. This is all speculation, of course, but it is fun to wonder about. So yeah, that's how One Robotic Mario explains the subplot to Super Mario Sunshine, but also how it foreshadowed the events that would take place over a decade later. So let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. For those who have watched the channel for quite a while now and want to support me as a creator, I finally have merch! Over the years, people have asked me if I was ever going to make t-shirts and the like, so I finally got around to doing so. You can pick up 2 variants of an extremely comfy SwankyBox t-shirt, or you can check out my snapback hat. All the products are made from high quality materials, and I personally love the embroidery quality of the hat. For the longest time, the only kind of merchandise I had was my book, but if you weren't interested in becoming a YouTuber yourself, you didn't really have another option. If you want to pick up a SwankyBox shirt, or perhaps one of my, my hats, you can find a link in the description below, or you can check out the merch shelf that'll pop up below certain videos. I want to thank all of you for obviously supporting me over the years. It's really exciting to be diving into the whole merch area. It's new territory for me outside the book, like I said, but thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you all soon. And with that, thanks for watching, guys and gals, and until my next video, cheers.